Hello there ladies and gentlemen, I'm Paul TX141 Walsh, welcoming you to an all new World of Warships gameplay today on our channel. In this episode we'll be sailing out a new Tier 3 Japanese battleship, the Kawachi, in a Tier 4 standard battle on the map Strait. We are joined by our good friend Nick today, who is sailing out in his Tenryu. And for those wondering, yep, Nick's new to the world of Warships, so feel free to send him a friendly greeting in the comments section of this video, I'm sure he'll appreciate it. The focus of today's video, however, is the concept of tanking in battleships, and on top of that, why I think the Kawachi is a brilliant ship to learn how to tank damage. Now let's wind back the clock a little bit. What does tanking mean, or at least in my experience? For me, tanking is the concept of absorbing large amounts of damage for your team, and therefore distracting the enemy team from the more dangerous threats perhaps, such as your team's cruisers. Whereby the cruisers will have the more consistent damage output over a longer period of time, and they've always got the torpedoes, especially at the tier we're looking at here, to back up their damage output. Now we say consistent damage output, well what do we mean by that? Well, the Kawachi, for reference, has a 30-second reload on its 6 pairs of 305mm artillery pieces. And on top of that, these guns have got very weak gun handling in my experience. What with the fact they have 162 meters dispersion at their maximum range of 10.9 kilometers, and it's going to feel worse than that because these guns couldn't hit the broadside of a barn unless the barn was literally on top of the ship, and even then perhaps it would struggle. And on top of that, your turret traverse time for 180 degrees with expert marksman is 34.6 seconds. It's excruciatingly long. Although one comforting factor is the fact that you do have this sort of wing style placement of the guns, whereby you have one pair mounted on the bow, one mounted towards the aft, and then you have 2 on the starboard side and 2 on the port side, meaning that technically you can always have 2 pairs of guns available for firing. Now, let's detract on that for a second as we make our way forward at our maximum speed of 20 knots, which is slow, but we'll get used to it. Let's look at what's happening and what we're thinking right now. Our Phoenix and Wyoming are both going north towards our base. Now we're not going to have a go at them, but this really undermines our fight in the south. And the question is, do we go north with them? Well, in my personal experience, no. We're going to commit to the southern fight. Because the thing is, if we go north as well, and the enemy team steamrolls through the south as a result, i.e. we assume they're going to send all 6 of their ships south that spawned in the southwestern corner of the map, then our team is going to be pincered on 2 sides up at the base, i.e. the enemy team's push from the northwestern corner, backed up by the enemy team's push from the southeastern corner. We can't let that happen. So that's why we want to tank as much damage as possible to enable our 3 remnant cruisers, our Nix Tenryu, our St. Louis and Danai, do as much damage as possible and undermine the enemy's push through the south. And as we're going to see very shortly, 2 battleships and 4 enemy cruisers will confront us. Now let's come back to the damage output. So, the Kawachi's guns, when they hit, will do a good amount of damage. Your high explosive does a maximum damage of 5,100, which is very nice, and you have a 29% fire chance, meaning you can reliably set fires to foes and cause them to exhaust their damage control parties and their repair parties. And we're going to try and do so on the enemy South Carolina, and when it's spotted a little bit later, the enemy Nassau. On top of that, your armor piercing will citadel for 8,100 damage maximum, which is very nice when a cruiser drifts too close and tries to set up a broadside to either fire all their guns or launch all their torpedoes. So you've always got that as a backup option, but keep your foes close if you're going to do so, because the armor piercing has debatable results in my experience at longer ranges, if it hits. But anyway, why is the Kawachi a good ship to learn how to tank? Well, one thing is you just probably noticed, its concealment is wonderful, whereby it gets detected at sea without concealment expert at 9.3 kilometers, and by air 8.3 kilometers. That means, unlike the South Carolina that was spotted very early on, you have the ability to disengage from battles more easily than the South Carolina. And to keep in mind, the South Carolina, the Nassau and the Kawachi all have roughly the same maximum speed. Difference is, we have the better concealment at standard, so therefore we can pull back so long as we do not overcommit too much. And that's why you'll notice we're slowing down here, because we don't want to drift too far forward into the 4 enemy cruisers that are all set up to engage us on the southern section of the enemy team's push here. But in the meantime, we are presenting an ample target to the enemy South Carolina and Nassau. And we hit again with our second salvo, doing a bit more damage, now up to 6,000, and picking up an incapacitation. I'm not sure what was broken. Now another thing to consider in general when you're trying to tank damage is fire damage. Whereby, when you have a fire on your ship, when do you put it out? Well, as we're going to see here on the enemy Nassau, do not put out the fire straight away when you've got all your health. Because the thing is, if another fire is set shortly after, you're going to bleed a lot of health through the follow-up fire, because you've got no way of getting rid of it. Here's the example. The enemy nacelle has received a fire from our guns, and they automatically put it out. Which means as soon as they receive any form of bleed, whether it be flooding from our Danai's torpedoes, which are going to hit, or our high explosive, that bleed is going to stick with them for at least a minute, and therefore they're going to lose a lot of health and it can cost them their ship. We pick up a fire on the other hand, we're not going to put out the first fire, we'll only put it out if a second fire is struck, and that second fire is struck whilst the first fire has got a considerable time period left on it. And there's the second fire on the nacelle, i.e. the follow-up one from the one earlier that was put out, and they're also flooding right now, so they're out the game, regardless of whether our teammates finished off with shells or it's the bleed damage that gets them. And notice how we're using our heal here to outrun the fire damage that we've got on our ship. And that's something to note. Your heal will outrun the damage dealt by a single fire whilst the two are active, so whilst the fire is active versus your heal. Your heal will not outrun the damage done by two fires at the same time. Something to keep in mind. Now as this fire gradually comes to its end, it's only got 10 seconds left on the clock, the enemy nacelle's now gone, it's still 5 versus 4. But notice now how the enemy's formation is splitting up. The enemy's cruisers in particular are pulling back a little bit, meanwhile the South Carolina is being left out in the wide. They're in a bit of an overcommittal position by comparison. What this means now is we can keep the front line just creeping forward very gradually if we want. Alternatively, we can pull the front line back and let the enemy cruisers and the South Carolina think, actually the enemy team's retreating, let's get back on the push. And that's what we're doing here, we're making sure the front line stays back. That's why Nick's pulled his temporary really far back. I said to him that this will help make the enemy team come forward and perhaps overextend if they think that you're not going to commit in your temporary. Now lobbing in another high explosive salvo towards the South Carolina, we pick up a fire once again. It looks as though they've got 2 fires on them, but they've put the fire out. And we'll try and set another one as a result in a second. In fact, our fire has remained. The other fire that was on them was put out. Now making our way up towards the South Carolina, we become unspotted once again. Our concealment working to our advantage. And having already used up one hill, we've got another hill on the way already. We're using premium consumables to be fair, and if you do have the money, strongly recommend it. It will help you absorb a lot more damage in the long haul. As we finish off the South Carolina for our first kill. But if you're rather new to the game, you don't have to use premium consumables in order to tank damage. It's just if you've got the money to do so, I'd recommend it. Especially if you are running a premium account on top of just playing the game, as we are. Now, at this point, the 2 enemy battleships have been eliminated, which means now we can play things how we want. Now our Danai has charged off north, going towards what appears to be an enemy cruiser, the enemy Danai, and they've torn it to pieces. But the issue here at this point is this now means that the enemy cruisers once again have the numerical advantage. And indeed, if they can finish off Nick's Tenryu or they can finish off our St. Louis, it makes life a bit of misery for us because then we'll be outnumbered by cruisers and ripped to pieces. So this is why we're not going forward any further. And I've told Nick, let's not push, because if these cruisers get around us and take either you or the St. Louis out, we're just going to get ripped to pieces in the long haul. So instead, we're playing the long range game at the moment against the enemy St. Louis. It's not to worry us, and we set a fire on the St. Louis, and we can see up north our team are winning considerably, although it's going to take a bit more time for them to mop up what's left up there. At this point, another fire set on our ship, we use our heal, but we don't put the fire out because it's only a single fire, and we can see we're repairing a considerable amount of damage. Don't have to worry, and I believe you do heal all of the fire damage dealt to your ship, or a very high percentage of it. Feel free to let me know in the comment section below exactly what the ratio is. And here we can see the enemy Caledon has started to push forward, and their Freehan is coming with them. So this is the point where the enemy team is making the break, especially with our St. Louis being wounded now, and Nick being down to 3/4 of his health. Now unfortunately we do bump into our St. Louis for a second time. My apologies good sir and madam if you ever watched this video, didn't mean to do that. But here's the nice thing, now these 2 cruisers are pushing forward, they left behind their friendly St. Louis and they've left behind the other cruiser that was with them earlier on. I'm not sure what it was, I think it was a Danai. But regardless, that means we can start to rip apart this Caledon in particular. And here a number of you will be screaming out as we set 2 fires on the Caledon, but do no actual high explosive damage per se as they put the 2 fires out. You should really be loading armor piercing right now. And yes, I completely agree with you ladies and gentlemen, this is a cock up on my end. I didn't load armor piercing because I wasn't really thinking, and on top of that as well, I was hoping that Nick would be able to take out the Caledon in the long haul. Not blaming him for anything, but just giving you an idea. Just trying to tank some damage for him to let him do some damage himself. We do knock out one of their torpedo tubes on the Caledon briefly. And now we look towards the enemy Freant that is charging forward using their speed to their advantage. They're probably going to try and torpedo us. Now at this point you may be wondering, well, how manoeuvrable is the Kawachi if she's not that fast in a straight line? Well, her rudder shift isn't too bad if you get used to it. A 10.7 second rudder shift, it allows you to dodge torpedoes. We'll find out later on if we do dodge torpedoes, if they're ever sent our way. Wink wink. And with a 560 metre turn circle radius, that means you can hug land masses quite nicely. And there we pick up an incapacitation on the Freant, but we're not sure what we broke. And we're really hoping Nick can finish off this Caledon now, because it's probably throwing torpedoes at us with its respectable torpedo range. We're well within that range. And we're taking a little bit of damage from their armour piercing, but nothing major. Our armour holding up. And Nick is gradually scoring some damage here. Good on him. And we think we're going to finish off the Caledon with a salvo. At least we hope, as they start to heal. And we do pick up a fire and knock out one of their torpedo tubes permanently, but we should have really used armour piercing there. And here's the difference between using high explosive and if you've been using armour piercing, as we'll see later on against a different ship, that Caledon would be gone by now most likely. But still, it's always nice to point out the key things you should do in ships. Now torpedoes coming from the Caledon, we thought they were coming, so we changed up our path a little bit in order to confuse them in terms of when they should send their torpedoes. And with the fires burning on the Caledon and what with Nick's shells going in as well, it falls to Nick. Good on you, sir. And we start to score some secondary hits on the Freant, who's got within our secondary range of 3 kilometres. And here we're soaking up some over penetrations in our armour piercing, and we're constantly shifting direction around to make sure their torpedoes cannot hit us. And our rudder shift, whilst it may be cumbersome, as we're going to see, means we dodge an entire set of torpedoes off from one of their broadsides, and they're probably going to send in some more torpedoes as well if they've got any remaining. Well, at least we're seeing that's why they're presenting a broadside, and now we've got the armour piercing loaded. With only 5 seconds left on our reload, now we're going to show what happens when you throw armour piercing at one of these lightly armoured cruisers in the Kawachi. Oh dear, you lost a lot of your health, sir. 11,000 of it, as we dodge the other sets of torpedoes off the other side of their ship. And we pick up another fire. Our heal's almost ready again, so therefore we can heal all that damage. And the enemy Kuma is pushing up. On top of that, St. Louis as well. And as the fire continuously burns, we're going to get the hill ready very shortly. We just want Nick to finish off this Tenryu first. Go on, Nick, throw some torpedoes in there. You know you've got them if you remember. Not saying I had to remind Nick that he had torpedoes when we were playing this game. But he's a beginner. All's fair in love and war. There we go. Nice set of torpedoes there to finish off the Freant. Good job, Nick. Now we're looking towards the enemy Kuma. Throwing in some armour piercing towards them. Hopefully going to pick up a citadel with some penetrations. There we get a bounce. We'd expect that really, what with our dispersion. And with this fire still burning, we've used up another hill. We're not going to put the fire out just yet, but as our health heads down towards our final sort of 15-10%, then we'll start putting out the first fire if we think it's going to be a very dangerous situation. And here the Kuma is looking towards us and it's going to start throwing a high explosive towards us. They're going to try and burn us down. And we throw in a full armour piercing salvo here, and again, using the armour piercing this time, we knock off 17,000 of their health. So there's the difference between firing high explosive at a cruiser's broadside and a battleship versus using armour piercing. That's been articulated. And at this point, we're pointing our bow towards the Kuma somewhat, angling it, and then going back to the broadside because we don't know whether they're throwing their torpedoes towards us, and we've got to be wary for that. And here, they do set another fire on us. As you'll see very shortly, we're going to let our health drip as much as possible, and then put the fire out. And we hope that this salvo will finish the Kuma off. Fortunately, we pick up another citadel, and they're out of the game for our second kill. And we're on 50 health. So we've tanked as much damage as possible. Our next hill is only 14 seconds away, and it looks like the enemy St. Louis is now going to be between a rock and 2 very hard places. What with Nick's Tenryu on one side and our Wakataki on the other. Nick's throwing some torpedoes towards the St. Louis, so is our Wakataki going to do so shortly. We're out of this engagement. Our concealment is making sure we're not detected anymore, and we throw on our last hill. And with the torpedoes drifting in, looks as though the Wakataki's going to get it for the final kill of the match. There we go, game over. Time to take a look at the post-game stats. Well, that was a rather hard-fought victory, but we worked for it, and we can see our battle performance consisted of 58,468 HP of damage, 36 target hits for our main batteries, 5 incapacitations, 2 enemy ships destroyed, 7 fires set, 4 citadel hits, and 2 secondary battery hits. And we also picked up 2 achievements. Firstly, the heroic achievement of Dreadnought for receiving damage exceeding 120% of our ship's normal health pool from 4 or more enemy ships and survive the battle, and also the normal achievement of Fireproof for receiving damage caused by fire that exceeds 40% of the ship's normal health pool and survive the battle. Looking at the team scores, we can see that we topped our team in terms of base experience earned, picking up 1027. We did not carry the team, we just did our job of tanking as much damage as possible and dishing some out, quite significant numbers in certain cases, when the time was right. And as we can see as well, Nick placed 4th on our team in his Tenryu with 688 experience. Not too bad, Nick, you're getting better every day. Focusing on our detailed report, we can see that we were successful in tanking damage for our team, whereby we received a total of 60,323 damage, and to put that in perspective, that's 156% of our normal health pool. Alternatively, in terms of the fire damage we received, that 27,084, that alone was 70% of our standard health pool. And finally, coming on to our credits and experience earned, we can see we walked away with 59,600 silver credits and 1,540 experience for our commander. To conclude, hopefully today we have demonstrated how the Kawachi can make for a brilliant battleship to learn how to tank damage in for battleships in general, whereby at her tier she has a phenomenal health pool of 38,700, and when you combine that with her great detectability values, making her stealthier than some of the cruisers she can face at a like-for-like tier, she's a battleship that can stick her nose into the fight, pick up the damage, and when her captain's ready, so long as he hasn't extended her too far into the battle, pull her out, let her heal up and put out the fires, and then get her stuck into the fight once again. That means the Kawachi is a ship that can always be in the fight and be relied upon as the one battleship that will end up tanking one for the team. And so I've been TX141, and if you have enjoyed this video, why not leave a like, comment or subscribe for future World of Warships videos on my channel. But until next time, ladies and gentlemen, take care and fair seas.